Hello and welcome to the Collective Reset podcast, where we gather to discuss our lives, our passions, self-care, and how we're handling this worldwide reset. So if you could please introduce yourself and where you are dialing or calling in from.
I'm Pixie Lighthorse, and I am dialing in from Redmond, Oregon, which is just about 30 miles north of Bend.
Pixie, can you tell us why you write under the name Pixie Lighthorse, or the meaning behind the name?
Yeah, Pixie is a nickname from childhood and less significant than Lighthorse, which is the tribal sort of, I'm sure there was a different name for it, but law enforcement at the time of removal, that meaning the Indian Removal Act in the South. From my people moved from Mississippi to Oklahoma. And so each of the 5 civilized nations got to have their own tribal law enforcement, and they were called the Lighthorse. And my great grandfather was part of that. And so when I began the deeper work of expanding my care reach, I adopted that name after divorce. And I just started writing under it. It felt like it really flowed. It's my son's middle name. And so, yeah.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Thank you for sharing that. I've read, when I was doing my research on you, and now I was introduced to your work by Michelle, who is a mutual friend of Outer Banks Yoga Studio, fantastic yoga studio if you're in Outer Banks. And Michelle gave me your book, and it was right before I was leaving on tour, and it was your honoring book, and I absolutely fell in love with your work. And when I was reading about the driving force, or one of the driving forces behind it, it was the liberation of people and humans, and also the vitality of the earth simultaneously. And so I'm wondering how you think we wound up in a place where both are so depleted.
Yeah, I mean, I think living in a colonized nation, we are under the influence of a real top-down model. And so, everything sort of serves the top tier. And so everything that trickles down into the lower rungs of the ladder, as Sonia Renee Taylor might say, are subjects. And depending on your level of privilege and things like that, if you're fighting for your privilege, then things like connection to the earth and disposability of whether it's trash and petrochemical plastics and things like that, it's those things have become a non-priority to our capitalist structure. So, as we rebond with nature, rebond with each other, then we can make repairs. So I've always had I had this working theory for a long time that I used in relationship, which was we have a disruption, right? And then we make repairs, and then we rebond. And what I've come to know is that actually repairs can't often be made until we rebond. So I've restructured that in my own thinking to be disrupt, rebond, repair. And I think I'd been practicing it for a long time and writing about it and showing up in that way. But I didn't really put it together that our intimate experiences, our relationality, are kind of top priority if we really want to make some changes. We don't know each other. We're not looking out for each other.
And how do you introduce that work of rebond to either nature or to people or to ourselves in your work to get them to the state of repair then?
Well, I mean, everyone is not having the same experience. Everyone does not have access to nature in the way that I do, or perhaps you do. Everyone does not have access to resources. So, sometimes I tell a story when I was really, really broke and living in Los Angeles, and I shared an apartment with 3 other people, and I had a little balcony, and this pigeon would come every season and lay 2 little eggs on my balcony. And by balcony, I mean like a ledge that you could walk out on. And there was something so seasonally comforting, that cycle, that this same pigeon or the pigeon's descendants came back. And so, there are like city or creatures and your one little tree on the sidewalk, but there's comfort in that, and we know that every time the leaves fall and they come back out, there's a real sense of relationality if we take the time to do that. So our bond with nature is in how we perceive it, how we interact with it, how we trust its very complex matrix. Working with plant medicine these almost 20 years, it's it's far outside the sort of, for lack of a better term, like the imagination of whiteness, to be able to understand that there's communications happening under the soil between us and plants. There are things being communicated just when we're not talking, and those kinds of intimacies and communications are the things that I think we really need. And many people respond to my work with kind of an exhale and not always a lot of language around it. And I think that's really important, to honor the sensations and the feelings, and not just this one language that most of us share.
I love what you said about like giving people the language. And I think that so many of us are sitting at home and are sitting at crossroads and are sitting someplace undecided and fearful, and perhaps don't have the words to put to the space and the feelings that they're having and holding. And what I love about what you do and what you provide through your words and through your work is that you are giving people space and the verbiage to put to what's moving through them.
Paints a little bit of a picture.
Yeah.
There are so many limits to language.
Mm-hmm. I love that. You did mention plant medicine. And so can you tell us about the medicine circles that you work within, and how you see plant medicine aiding in our collective healing, if we were to go back to nature, to rebond with what we can find
and what we can grow, even
what we can grow,
spaces and kitchen windowsills and things like that. I think that we have to experience, again, relationality. So it doesn't matter as much what we grow or what we work with. There's been a big kind of conversation around the appropriation of plant medicines from indigenous peoples, and the commodification is really the problematic part of it. Buying a wand of white sage in the health food store is something that unknowingly might be lit up and just burned, and then a couple weeks later you'll get another one. But the practice is really like a little goes a long way. So in whatever circles I'm sitting in, that's always an ethic that I bring there, is that one wand of sage, and especially if procured from someone who has grown it themselves and has a relationship with that plant and has harvested it with care, one tiny little piece of a leaf, one little sip of the smoke is enough. Like, we're very over commodified, and so the relationship with the plant is the one that we make with it, and anything we can grow, even if it's just your house plant. It's important. These are oxygenators. These are complex cellular structures that feed us and replenish our air. And, as we try to make a big spiritual deal or a ritual deal out of working with plant medicines, I think there's a lot that gets missed in there. I think that the relationality piece is what we're looking for. And I think what we're looking for is more of a, we're sensory seeking creatures, many of us. And so the smells and the sacredness and the setting really plays into how we experience things. But we also have to realize how that can be very elitist. We just don't all have access to that, and we don't all have access to it all the time. Mm-hmm. So if I were to lose, for example, my home, or any of my comforts or privileges that I have, would I still be able to make medicine inside of my body? Would I still be able to relate? I hope so,
I do like what you say about, there is such a privilege in being able to do some of this, and recognizing that privilege is so incredibly important. I also think part of that is recognizing that you don't have to have the expansive yard or the big house or the the large terrace. It can be a tiny ledge. It can be a windowsill. In order to begin to relate and rebond and connect back. When we talk about relating back to the land, and you spoke about your own heritage, we're sitting in a time right now where we're seeing, and not quickly enough, but we're seeing that pieces of lands are beginning to be given back. And when you think about the spiritual connection to land and being able to holistically heal oneself, I'm wondering what you see in terms of like the spiritual connection for those people to receive their land back, and what this means for them as a community, and for their healing as a community.
Gosh, that's a really good and rich question. I think that, yes, not quickly enough. I think that the McGirt case in Oklahoma State that returned just law, the jurisdiction of law back to tribal peoples there, my own included, is an example of what like victory feels like. It feels like having a home. And a lot of people, particularly Black and Indigenous people here, have been displaced from their homelands. The nation was built on Black and Indigenous people's labors, and here it is, Labor Day. Mm-hmm. And so the return, it's not a give back as much as it is a sort of like, I'm seeking for language again, as a rehabilitation, a return and a rebonding, sort of like, if you've ever had a family member that's been in prison, mm-hmm. and they come out, it's all of that missed time, missed experiences, missed touch and love and exchange. Mm-hmm. And so for people who think way outside of the conditioning that we've been shown, this is a return of your spirit, mm-hmm. that has been stolen. Mm-hmm. And so I feel like I don't cry very often, but I'm actually feeling like I might do some weeping here. Mm-hmm. It really is that. It's a return of your spirit. And, I think we have to count those victories as real blessings and do everything that we can with them when little victories and big victories occur, and keep fighting and pressing, applying pressure for more, because there are so many other things happening that are really, truly oppressive and hard to sit with on a daily basis. Mm-hmm. And so, when I see, as I did this morning, that there are 47 acres in Seattle that are, that many of us are demanding be handed to Nurturing Roots. Mm-hmm. It's just like the energy is growing every day. There's something or someone to get behind, to mm-hmm. give them this experience back, of their spirit.
Can you share? So in not just your work has me blown away and often, but also your activism work and just how you've been showing up as an ally and how you've been talking to the allies. I've appreciated. I'm wondering, like right now, if people are like, I wonder what people are doing, what allies are doing, how they're showing up. How have you been showing up in your own circles? What has it been through protesting? Has it been through online efforts? What has had you fired up, and where have you seen yourself showcasing your voice?
Gosh, well, first out of the gate, I just want to say that like allyship is one of those terms, kind of like medicine woman. It's something like we would never call ourselves. Yeah. It feels always really good for someone else to recognize us that way. But this is the activism part is I feel always like a beginner, and I guess I feel like a beginner in almost everything I do. Fortunately for me, because I think that keeps people humble. Mm-hmm. But yes, I'm doing a little bit of all of those things as I can, and I have a big mouth on social media, and
I love it. I am always like strongly, loudly clapping at your posts.
I'm not always saying the right things the right way, and I think we have to be willing to get it wrong and be able to take some feedback from people who are benefiting from that activism. Like, how could we do that better? And I just think that's, as so many educators say, that's just lifelong learning. We're changing our language and adapting every day so rapidly, and technology is giving us this way to connect with each other's causes and really be like, it's being mixed race is so interesting because there's a part of me that has as Rowan White would say, like a blood memory of my ancestry, and then there's a part of me that is totally a subject of whiteness, and and in favor of it based on kind of how we're all still living and functioning here, most of us. And so, like, okay, today I'm going to spend my privilege and be like the big wind beneath someone's wings as much as I can. Whatever comes across my radar, I'm going to give that my all, because that's hot for them, and amplification is so important. On a local level, there are Indigenous farmers that need help. There are city council meetings that I attend. I've really gotten as involved as I can be, and again, I'm kind of green at this, but in listening into city council meetings and interviews, BIPOC panelists. We have some amazing grassroots activism here, and they let me come, and I just feel like that's such a huge honor to listen in to what candidates are going to be doing for immigrants, what they are going to be doing for marginalized people of any kind, and disability, gender, all across the board. We're just demanding, and calling for resignations of people who aren't getting the job done, who aren't culturally humble and, incompetent at the jobs they're doing. And so that the more political piece, our days now, every one of us, if you are in the States, is politicized. And I enjoy taking that on, like, okay, great. But it's not that difficult to find out when your city council meeting is happening virtually, especially now, and just tune right in. And sometimes I'm shocked because there's 10 people on there or 14 people, and I live in a area that has 150,000 people in it, and I'm thinking people just don't know how easy it is being made for them to have a voice. We think that having a voice is something that only really bold people or manifesting generators do, or it's not. It's something that everyday people can. And while we still have some scraps of democracy left, we really need to get in there and make that good trouble that John Lewis speaks of.
Necessary trouble. Absolutely. And it is true. It's like technology has made it so easy to be involved. And I've said often on here, everyone has a lane, and maybe your lane isn't protesting, and maybe it's not, standing on the front lines, but it can be home, sitting on your couch, on your use those computer quick fingers for something that is going to move us forward. But you have to be loud. You have to demand.
Yeah, constantly applying pressure. And I hit the pillow every night thinking, oh, I really wish I would have made time for that. Or, just diversifying our bookshelves, teaching, if you have children, teaching them in a different way. Exposure is everything. Zanea, the future, said yesterday, it's not about who we stand up for, it's about the people we sit with. Who are you spending time with? If you're spending time with only people who are like you, then that's a little cage for me, and that makes me feel very nervous. I don't like that feeling. And there have been many times in my life where I have had an inner circle that was not very expansive or broad spectrum in their experiences, and I don't like that.
I like that you don't like that. I think we should all not like that. So I was introduced to you, like I mentioned, in Prayers of Honoring. And what I loved about that book was that you spoke about honoring ourselves by sitting with our traumas and our fears. And one of the things that I often speak to whoever will listen about is not loving, trying to love ourselves out of our pain, right? Love and light our way through this. That it's not beneficial or useful, and it's exhausting. And what is also tiring, yes, is sitting with the work, but that there are so many benefits from it. And so I'm wondering if you can share why it is necessary for us at some point and some time to sit with our fear or our pain or our trauma, and why that's honoring ourselves.
I mean, I see us magnificent humans as painting ourselves into these, as a result of modern conveniences and fears and things like that, into these very small corners. And it's very limiting. And so, whether we are rebonding with ourselves by allowing ourselves to experience the pain of grief, whether we are rebonding in our relationships as a result of having more potent conversations about our values and what really matters. And one of the things we've seen with COVID and the Black Lives Matter movement is that as they kind of sort of coalesced this last season, is that people have had the time and the consciousness, because we're really trying to put it in front of them. This is the reality of what's happening. Mm-hmm. It's shocking, it's nerve-wracking, to folks who have not ventured into those territories yet. I guess we could really maybe distill it by saying it is about rebonding. It's about rebonding with every person. It's about rebonding with nature and all of the plants. It's about strengthening our relationships. A lot of relationships and friendships and marriages and things have kind of crumbled because some of those old structures that are not contributing to our wellness are starting to crumble. Mm-hmm. The cracks have been discovered, called out. They're really being shown to us in a big way. And I think that when the truth starts seeping in there, it's both like scary and invigorating, Mm-hmm. So, did I answer your question?
Yes. Yes, you did. You mentioned also rituals in your book. And while, I was somebody who grew up totally, a single mother in Harlem, between Harlem and Yogaville. And so we certainly didn't have expansive space to set up large rituals. But I grew up with a yoga teacher and a meditation teacher. And so whether it was our one-bedroom apartment or Yogaville's ashram property, ritual was a big part of our day. And as I've gotten older, it's become how I move through what I feel like I need to let out and how I show up for myself. And so I'm wondering, when we're introducing this idea to people who are now sitting at home with time and trying to figure out something that provides a little structure that maybe aids to helping them feel a bit more tethered, what would you suggest for someone who's like, I have no idea about rituals, but I'd like to wake up in the morning or in the middle of my day or at night, start something?
Yeah, I love knowing you that way and how you grew into who you are. I mean, ritual is very simple. I think we probably have expanded and contracted in the way that we see ritual. And right now, there's a lot of anxiety among the people. And so simple rituals, like right now, we've got a lot of access to breath work online and in just, social media, free streaming things. We can mess with our oxygen a little bit and kind of get in our bodies. Anything that helps me get in my body is a ritual. That is healing to me. For some folks, it's that sacred 20 minutes before everyone wakes up with their cup of coffee in their hand, or taking a walk. I mean, ceremony is one of those things, and or more involved ritual are those things that are perhaps, best experienced in a transition or with, people who are all, trying to experience and raise some energy. We can do that in just a number of different ways, not in any way limited to our imagination. Mm-hmm. But I just think that when we are in our bodies and when we are honoring ourselves, we're going to be more inclined to honor others, to honor our space, to honor our time and how we're spending it, to reprioritize. So anytime we can sit still, you'd mentioned like sitting still and being with trauma, being with pain, being with joy, with people that we might consider our people who understand us. That sort of fits into ritual. I have a group that meets here every Friday that we can, and does a little physical distancing, right? So important not to socially distance. We really need that social interaction, but physically giving a little bit of space. And it is a real anchor for me to make sure that I have this thing I can count on from 10 to 1 every single Friday. And I used to host monthly groups or seasonal groups and things like that. But right now, what the times have been calling for me and some folks around me is something weekly that I can count on. Not everyone can make it all the time, and that's fine. But it's a commitment, and it's been really, really wonderful to see everyone growing, to know them on a weekly basis. We know each other now and again, right? So really changing and committing. It seems difficult to do, but that ritual of just sitting in a circle of lawn chairs has been very important for me. I think I really want to, I'm so grateful that you have listeners, but I really want to push the imagination, right? Like if from a very little girl, I was drawing pictures of characters inside of cages. And so I think in a strange way, liberation has been a part of me for a really long time. Anything that makes me feel constricted or bound is, my spirit doesn't have room. And so I have a pretty big spirit that needs a lot of room. And I think that finding all the ways in which it is expressed and is available for others to express has been really important.
I love that. And I love that what you said about when you show up for yourself, when you make that commitment to yourself, it makes you make different choices, right? And I think it's like when you really start to take care of yourself and to show up for you when other people don't, it's immediately recognizable. Or it starts to become more recognizable than it usually is. When the job doesn't feel good, it starts to not feel good faster. When the partnership doesn't feel good, you recognize those signs, I think, a little faster. And I think that all starts from showing up for you.
Yeah. And the less tolerant I think that we are of ourselves and our inner processes. I mean, I have all kinds of things I've discovered in the last decade or so, like childhood brain injury and various traumas have come forth, and neurodivergence, and all of these sort of things that make me. And because it's not necessarily conforming to what we were taught we should act like, be like, think like, spend our time doing, there's like an unraveling process that has to happen. It's like pulling that yarn on the sweater, and just how will it be if I'm just naked here without my sweater of comfort? I'm gonna be cold. I might feel the elements. I might not look down and appreciate what I see. So I don't know. At almost 50 years old, I think I love to hear when people are more self-accepting. They're automatically going to be more accepting of others, and they're going to be more open to differences. It is uncomfortable. Being is uncomfortable for everyone.
And I think that is like one of the biggest parts of it. It's what I always have to tell myself when I get really uncomfortable, is like, you have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable in order to move forward. It's like, this is going to suck and it might be really awkward, but like, we're just going to do this because the other side of this feels a little better than this side. So
yeah, and if you have just one good friend or one person or even a companion animal or a tree to talk, to verbalize or to, do a little of this with, just it's so helpful to be able to share a little bit of how uncomfortable it is.
Thank you for sharing that. Now, I think that you're working on an illustrated book for adults. I think that you announced that but I don't want to. Can you tell us the projects that you have coming up and what people can look forward to?
Yeah. So I completed my 5th sort of regular book in the style that I ordinarily work with last October, and then I had written a piece that that a friend of mine and I collaborated on, and we released that in August. It's an all ages illustrated called Earth is Holding You. And we self-published it because we didn't get what we wanted from publishers, that they're still a little bit like 50 years behind the times in terms of being fair and equitable. So we self-published. It came out. It's a beautiful, colorful, sort of a rainbow support. I think of it as like a support words in poetry, kind of from the aunties to inner children and to children. So it was a special,
I love that.
Special piece for us to write. Simple, beautiful, encouraging, and it also, it doesn't name it in the way that Prayers of Honoring does, but it also is in keeping with that sort of wheel, like in the beginning, risk, ideas, trust building, and then community and action and fire, and then water and feelings and maybe a little insecurity or a little pain, and then wisdom and sharing and not resolution, just the ceremony of being, of completing the cycle. And so, in my way, I was trying to just kind of walk young readers through that part of themselves that is so akin to the medicine wheel, that is such a, is such a compass for my own life. But I just sort of slip it in there. So,
I love it.
Experience of going all the way around full circle, honoring every different stage.
Mm-hmm. That's exciting. I'm going to make sure that we link to that, to those works when we put up this post. Where else can people find you? So for those who are looking for you, websites, social media, all of your handles, where can people come find you and your work?
Yep. So the only social media that I do right now is on Instagram, and I'm at Pixie Lighthorse there. And my website's pixielighthorse.com. And my books can be found at my website. And then there are other avenues that you can, portals, book buying, book selling portals. They're sold at a lot of retailers, and I love supporting little bookstores. And so we do have a pretty wide way for people to interact through their local booksellers too.
Well, I carry your honoring book with me. It really, it came at the perfect time right before I was embarking on this trip around the U.S. And it was so beautiful how it was laid out, and it made me think so differently, and I just really appreciated it. So I hope that everybody goes and finds your work, finds your books, finds your voice on Instagram, because it honestly is a highlight. It is a true highlight. I also love how you respond to people's comments. It's great, Pixie. And I just want to thank you again for taking the time and making the time to hold space with me and for our watchers and listeners. I really appreciate it.
Such a huge honor. Thank you, Iana.
Thank you, Pixie. And to our Collective Reset audience, please find Pixie Lighthorse. And thank you for spending time with us.